recording.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about using local educational resources here from Rio. And the idea about critical dialogue is that the purpose of learning a language isn't just to talk about the weather, but it's to engage meaningfully with other human beings and with society. And that part of making meaning through language involves reflecting on society and ourselves, our identities, ethics, social justice. And so those are topics that it's important for us to be able to have a dialogue that draws on more than the examples that we have available through American English File. So American English File is a great base for this course because it provides a sequence across the courses. It's a textbook that we're familiar with, but it's also a textbook produced for a global market that aims at a global middle class and the aspirations of that middle class. So that means that it presents realities that are attuned to this kind of aspirational idea. So if we think about jobs, for example, presented.
No. Sorry, guys.
The jobs presented tend to be doctor, lawyer, actor, president, movie star, that kind of thing. So we're going to talk about occupations and another way of thinking about that from a local perspective. And the resource we're going to look at is called Rio on Watch. It's not an educational resource, it's a news page. It's a page that was set up in 2010, and the term refers to neighborhood watch, right? Which is an idea that neighbors will keep an eye on each other and what's going on. And Rio on Watch had the idea of keeping an eye on the government in the lead up to the Olympic Games, the Rio Olympics. So the idea was to hold government to account for things like evictions of favela residents. And the focus of the page actually is on presenting perspectives of people who live in communities, right? Poor neighborhoods, favelas in Rio City and the metropolitan area. So one of their campaigns, for example, is hashtag Stop Favela Stigma. And what's interesting about this site is, as well as trying to gain a local audience by publishing news in Portuguese, it also publishes in English. So on the web page, you can choose to access stories in English or in Portuguese. And one of the reasons is that in 2010, when they set up the site, it would be available to international readers, international journalists, and people who could place pressure on local government here in Brazil to stop abuses of human rights, to stop police violence. And so that idea about pressure being not just local, but international solidarity is the motivation for this site. And so here in this slide, you can see a section from the page, Stop Favela Stigma, and some questions, right? And it's from the teacher's version of the book, so you can see what kind of answers are expected. It's actually from a book called Beyond Words, which is provided for free to school students in Niterói and in some schools in Rio and other parts of Brazil. It's part of the PNLD, right? Have you guys heard of that program? So you can see there's some questions there, questions about stigma, what stigma might mean, where the campaign might be launched or might be circulated, right? Thinking about online circulation of language. And who might be quoted in a story about this topic? Okay, so does anyone have any questions about what I'm presenting? So I've got two things here. I've got a small phrase from Rio on Watch, and I've got a page from a textbook. Any questions? I can't see the chat, so if you do have questions, Katja, yell out if there are questions in the chat, okay? Thank you. So here is the next page of that same textbook. And you can see the question, read the text and answer with a classmate. Who are the connected and the disconnected in Brazil, right? So a story about a rapper, Emerson Martina, who lives in Rio, and there's some other information about her too, a fairly short text, right? Here's another article, also from the same textbook, and you can see that the theme here is about re-signifying, creating new meanings for categories that we have in English and in Portuguese, like favela, right? And like the identity of somebody who lives in a peripheral area, right? So we can see this text is about that topic. Favela NGOs rewrite social identities and combat stigma, affirms new London School of Economics study. So you can see that this text is difficult and long, right? So if we're thinking about our focus is the first level of our course, then we need to consider how we can work with complex texts and pick sections or phrases or keywords. This is the next section of the same story, showing an example of cultural activities. And you can see, for example, the subtitle is Community Reporting on Rio. Okay, so presenting perspectives from the community. So what I want to do is take an article from Rio on Watch and think about how we can use it in the first level of our program, Iniciante 1. Okay, it's a long and difficult text, but I think that it's possible to use it, and it's possible to use it connecting it to the topic of introductions and of professions, right? So we know that often professions are presented as a very narrow set of social identities, usually middle class occupations connected to formal qualifications at universities. So thinking about this topic, I want to have in mind that in our teaching, we need to try and encourage an ethics of solidarity, of respect, and social justice and social transformation. And so the idea about transformation is something that we can connect to language through an approach called multiliteracies. So I don't know if you guys have heard that term before. So literacies is a concept that we have in a lot of our policy documents in Brazil. And the pedagogy of multiliteracies is the idea that there are multicultures, right? Multicultural society and multimodality. So there's more than just the written word. There's other types of literacy, like visual literacy. And the idea of the pedagogy of multiliteracies, as it was initially thought of, was about designing different social futures. So the metaphor is design. And we can think about design as a noun and a verb. So we have available designs, which could be an article, could be a meme, could be a song, could be a cartoon. Then we have designing, which is the work that goes into producing a text. And then we have the redesigned, which is what our students will do, or maybe what we will do with a text, right? So we take something and we remix it, we rework it. Everything always changes meaning when it changes hands and changes context, right? And the most important point about context is that context is the other person that you're with, or the other people that you're with. That's the first point of context that we need to think about. So these are the three meanings of design in the pedagogy of multiliteracies: available designs, designing, and the redesigned. And I'll give an example of that in a minute. And design elements, we have linguistic design, which is things like grammar, visual design, audio design, gestural design, spatial design. How those things work together, multimodal design. Okay, linguistic design, which is what we focus on in terms of teaching grammar, vocabulary, expression, includes things like delivery, modality, transitivity. So these are things that we often have another type of language to talk about. But the idea of design is useful because design serves a function, right? It serves a purpose. And here we're thinking about the social purpose that it serves. Okay, here's an example, folks. Have a look at this one. What elements of design can we see here if we think about visual design, linguistic, multimodal, gestural design? There's plenty of gestures here. Let me tell you why I picked this example. It's something that I saw and couldn't understand. I saw the first poster on the street in 2014, and I didn't understand what it meant. I didn't understand what waste pickers were. I didn't understand why the guy had a tin can on his shoulder. So who can help me out here? Audience participation. What are some design elements, and what is the meaning being produced?
I mean, there's a lot of Brazilian identity here with Carnaval. Some symbols on the upper part of the page, the colors and the image that allude to Carnaval. You can see the Brazilian squad shirt, the colors and the design of them, yellow and green, but the shield on the top has a recycle symbol on it. On the background, you'll see, if I believe, famous buildings or locations from their specific countries. In Brazil, I think it's Sambódromo there. No, I don't know what it is, but yeah, the famous landscapes from their specific countries, and the gestures on the people are basically soccer players. Yeah, basically that's it. What I see.
Okay, Rodrigo, can you comment on the hashtag "We are all waste pickers"?
Oh, of course, the hashtag is I don't know the term. I didn't know the term waste picker or recoletores. It would be like a free translation to catadores, which is a term that we use in Brazilian Portuguese to talk about people who deal with waste management, but not necessarily institutionalized. I think is more like people who work on the streets or who work by themselves picking waste. So alludes to a more individual contribution to the cause, because it's not like being part of an institution that deals with the waste, but is also actually a person who works individually to contribute to this higher cause.
Okay, thanks, Rodrigo. So I think what Rodrigo's given is a really culturally specific and rich definition of waste picker that somebody who just speaks English and hasn't had experience of that kind of occupation in their society can't understand, right? If you look up waste pickers on Google, you'll find that it's a common expression in English, extremely common. And where is it common? In India and South Africa. So if you look in Australia, it's difficult to find. If you look in the US as well, but it's actually a term that has very wide usage in English, and it's a category that are organized, right? So there are unions for waste pickers, and that syntax, we are all something, we can recognize from other campaigns that try and build solidarity, right? And so the meaning of this text is not in the decoding of "we are all waste pickers," because reading that is actually meaningless unless you can put it together with all of those visual elements and the gestures that index context, right? They index institutions, they index social relations, they index identities. And so I think that the message here is about how meaning is produced locally and interactionally. Okay. Does anyone else want to comment on these?
I think this was made during a time when waste pickers were highly valued in the country. So I think, well, what it is really saying is, you know, act as a waste picker, right? Don't throw trash on the street. Do a good job as a citizen. Maybe, right?
Which I also think it is really idealized image of catadores. Like, it's something that you do out of an ideal, out of a reason to help people. When we know that the experience of a lot of catadores in Brazil is not that glamorous, not that beautiful. It's just they do to survive. Yeah. If you watch a documentary called Destamira, it's basically the history of a person like that who has mental illness and lots of problems, and she can get the proper help, but she survives as a catadora. So there's also really idealization of the life of a waste picker. In Brazil, at least, is not that beautiful. It's not that like for the people. It's more like to survive.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting that that comment that you just made. Sorry, I couldn't tell who made that comment, but it's when we had this discussion with Katja and a friend from South Africa, he questioned whether maybe it was a false solidarity because we're not all waste pickers, right? And Katja mentioned at the time of the original discussion that about the government programs that were supporting waste pickers, including giving wider access to education. So I think that what we bring to our interpretation is part of our own histories and where we find the text and how it circulates. So I think that's really a valuable thing for us to learn as language learners and language teachers. So let me move to the next step in my presentation, which is to think about how we can approach teaching in this way, using the idea of multiliteracies. So the multiliteracies pedagogy involves working with situated practice. So in this case, we think about where that poster was, when, who saw it, you know, what they would do with it, what the intention is, what the reception is. Then there's overt instruction, which is the type of direct teaching of maybe grammar or maybe vocabulary or rules. The next dimension is critical framing, which is the kind of critical literacy or critical pedagogy work where we think about language in society. And then there's the idea of transformed practice, where we put what we've learned into some kind of application, some kind of product that we ourselves can make or can contribute to. So I realize that I'm not giving very much attention to each one of these elements, but I think that often we focus on the second one, overt instruction. But actually students really enjoy the other parts as well. Okay, so it's worth remembering that. And even though multiliteracy is based on the concept of design, we know that in reality, meaning is produced through other types of collective effort and negotiation that in Brazil we call gambiarra. Okay, so here's a map of Belo Horizonte, which is a planned city, right? It's one of the first planned cities in the world and in Brazil. But you can see that outside of the contorno, it's not a planned city at all. It follows another kind of logic. So why am I showing this? Just to give you the sense that every theory, including multiliteracies, leaves something out. And one thing that's left out perhaps is other types of problem solving and improvisation that we do in our work as teachers. Okay, so let's have a look at the article from Rio and Watch. At the bottom, you can see the link there. It's a very long article, as I mentioned earlier. So perhaps we could start with an image. And again, the hashtag, right? So this is a multimodal online text. And the hashtag is support a waste picker. Okay, let's imagine that in the first class we did the idea of introductions, maybe using the superheroes idea that Will suggested, or some other. Then we could have an activity where we could guess what do these people do? What are their occupations? Would anyone like to guess or give an answer? So this is for a live about waste pickers. Who might be there to talk about it, to discuss? What kind of person?
That could be any kind of person. I mean, anyone in the picture could be a waste picker.
Uh-huh. So maybe they're waste pickers. Maybe he's a waste picker. Maybe she's a waste picker. What else?
Maybe they are all.
Okay. Who else might be able to comment about this topic?
I mean, if they're not always speakers, some of them might be either teachers, professors, or some of them might be more like activists. I don't know the flag, the green flag. I don't think I can see. I don't know what it is, but seems some kind of activist movement, social movement to support waste speakers. Other than that, I see people who could be social workers or maybe psychologists, people who might work directly with the reality of these people or deal directly with the reality of these people.
Okay. So teacher, activist, social worker, these are all occupations that maybe we could introduce fairly early on, and maybe some of the students belong to these occupations or are members of these professions, right? So trying to build on a first class where you talk about the students, what they do, maybe they can use their own occupations, maybe they're students, maybe they're workers, maybe they're politicians, right? Maybe she's a doctor. Any questions? let's have a look at a bit of text then. Here's the full headline: Teaching. How does the pandemic impact waste pickers? Reinforces support a waste picker campaign. Okay. This paragraph is just, if you think about the syntax, names of people and their roles. It's very simple. So even though the text is long, it's quite simple, and it also has hypertext. So if you click on a link, it will take you to an explanation in Portuguese. So this is a very good text for beginner students because at home they can access it and get a better idea about who the people are. And it's using the type of language that we already got from the superhero example yesterday. I can't actually read the full screen. Would somebody like just to read through this for me, please?
Participants in the debate included Luis Santiago, president of the Cutrabon Recycling Cooperative and director of Rede Recicla Rio, Recycle Rio Network, as well as a member of the Municipal Forum of Waste Pickers of Rio de Janeiro. Gilberto Batista, founder of the Comunidade Limpa Solazer project in Morro do Salgueiro favela. Edson Freitas, founder of the NGO Ecovida, a cooperative of recyclable materials collectors based in Honório Gurgel that operates in several neighborhoods in Greater Rio de Janeiro. Tânia Ramos, social worker at the Street People's Pastoral Committee of the Archdiocese of Rio de Janeiro. Ilaci Oliveira, founder of the Transvida Cooperative in Vila Cruzeiro favela, and Claudete Costa, president and first woman representative of the National Movement of Waste Pickers, MNCR, in Rio de Janeiro.
Great. So we can see here this text is good because not only does it give names and roles, but it gives the definitions of some concepts that we need to understand if we want to speak English here. For example, Greater Rio de Janeiro, right? Or Greater Rio de Janeiro. That's a concept that we need to understand if we live in Baixada, São Gonçalo, Niterói, right? Gives us an idea. And the fact that favela is not translated, for example. So these are linguistic items that are useful. So what would be a good activity to do with this? A useful first step might just be to get people to list names and roles, because that breaks up the discursive presentation. But I think there are potentially other more interesting activities that you guys can think of. But this one is a good first step if we're going to do the next activity. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, task 1. Record and share a 30-second advertisement for the waste picker teaching, introducing 3 of the participants. Okay, so here we've got a screenshot as well of the live, of the Como a Pandemia Impacta os Catadores. So your students have got lots of support because all of this material is available in Portuguese, right? So they're not going to have any struggle. Plus, everybody knows about waste pickers, and maybe they've never heard that expression before, but it's going to be a useful one for them speaking English in the future, right? What can we do to prepare? Write a script, practice. You could do a WhatsApp recording. Check your recording and re-record if necessary, and share your recording with the class. So if I'm teaching this unit, maybe I would make one myself as an example. Any questions? So it's just 30 seconds. Vinicius.
No, sorry. I was going to just ask if the idea is to do this in class, or if this could be an activity like divided. Start the first part in class and then do the recording at home.
Yeah, I'm imagining that this would be for next class. So maybe homework or maybe something they could do in pairs, write the script in pairs, in breakout rooms, in groups of 3, and then come to the next class with the recording, or send the recording to the WhatsApp group.
Yep.
Potentially, if they write the script in class, that could be good. The script is just going to be things like, come to the debate. The debate includes Luis Santiago. He is president of blah, blah, blah. And Gilberto Batista, he is the founder of, and Claudette Costa, she is president of blah, blah, blah. So it's very, very simple, but it's using that language we use for introducing people, except we're introducing people who are more interesting than ourselves, perhaps. Okay. But actually, the article already has an activity, how to support waste pickers. This is another stretch from the article. Vinicius, can you help me again, please?
Yeah, sure. How to support waste pickers. Ferraz also invited all participants to share the videos of the Show Your Garbage Challenge, also available on the Sustainable Favela Network Facebook page, and mainly to post their own versions. To show support for waste pickers, you can make a simple homemade video showing the trash in your home and how you sort and organize it. These videos will foster a public debate on how we deal with our waste and bring attention to the hashtag Support a Waste Picker campaign, explained Ferraz, advising everyone who posts videos to include a mention of the campaign's hashtag and invited their followers to access the page for more information on how to support waste pickers during the pandemic. The idea is that each person who makes the video will challenge 3 others to post videos as well, which will create a wave of engagement and support.
Okay, guys, this is that third step in the multi-literacies framework, and in any critical literacy framework, it's taking action, okay? This is a very simple type of action. You can do it without speaking. This is a video where you show your rubbish, your trash. So, and you show how it's separated, and you use a hashtag. And this text, this whole article, also exists in Portuguese. So what would be really good, you can ask your students to read the whole text in Portuguese, and they just read these 2 paragraphs in English, and they can make a video, right? So that's the idea. And finally, the idea about redesign is that you take a concept and you reappropriate it for your own interests or campaign. Okay, brainstorm other campaign ideas. So we have support a waste picker. What are some other support campaigns? Any ideas?
Support a teacher?
Okay, let's take
You
it.
need help.
A teacher. So we've already got this. Think of another topic for a teach-in. Write a title.
How about a senior citizen?
Who?
About a senior citizen.
Senior citizen. Support a senior citizen. Great. Right. So we've got 2 ideas there. Write a title, which in the example could be the impact of COVID on senior citizens, the impact of COVID on teachers. Make a list of people to invite and their roles. So if it's about senior citizens, you could invite some senior citizens, maybe some activists, maybe some people from NGOs. You know, you can think about the model of the waste picker participants. And then repeating the same activity. Record a 30-second advertisement for the teaching, introducing 3 of the participants. That's it, folks. So just going back to Vinicius's question, this would be, wouldn't occupy the whole time of the class. Maybe you could spend half an hour on this in class 1, half an hour in class 2 and then half an hour in class 3. Questions? Comments?
Joel, Beyond Words is available online for teachers and students.
Sorry?
I'm sorry. Beyond Words is available online for teachers.
Yeah, the teacher's edition is available online, yes. It's actually a free book because it's part of that national textbook scheme.
Okay.
I think the activity of the garbage, it should be a very good one when they start learning objects in English. So they could actually show their garbage and say what would they have thrown away that they shouldn't have, or something like that.
Absolutely. Who else would like to give another an extra idea or a comment?
I think another work you could do would be involving, I don't know how you call them in English, entregadores de aplicativo. They had a strike last month because they had to go out and don't have the conditions to work. Something similar to the way speaker's idea to look into how they are coping, how the pandemic is affecting their work would be another interesting activity to think about, especially because it's something that is a service that is skyrocketed with the quarantine thing, the food delivery. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be a perfect example of a topic to write about or to do a campaign on.